Welcome to Plan 9 Crunch. I'm Doug Gibson. And today we have Shawn Langrick. I said that correctly, right? Shawn
You
Langrick
did.
here. And he is going to tell us about Titus Moody or Moody, but Moody, I don't know which one he used most of his life, the cult actor. And he has been a fascinating character. He started out, did some low budget war films. He was in Twilight Zone. He was in a whole bunch of TV shows. And then he veered into cult. Started working with Coleman Francis and Ray Dennis Steckler, and moved on from there to making his own films eventually. Last of the American Hobos, and also The Dirtiest Game in Town, and Outlaw Motorcycles. And Shawn, I have always been incredibly fascinated with Titus Moody. I just reading him in Cult Movie Magazine, watching him on the screen. And you told me recently, because you're a film scholar, you're going to do some kind of retrospective of his work, right? Could you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so I don't know, I've sort of fallen into this. I didn't decide to do this. It just sort of happened. And one day I realized I was writing his biography or doing research and putting together his biography. As you said, I'm kind of I don't like to call myself a film scholar or historian because I don't have all those credentials, but I'm pretty good at research, and I'm pretty good at digging through things and putting things together and tying together loose, sort of disparate sort of ideas. So that's how I got into doing some of these commentaries that I've done in the last few years, some essays for recent film releases. And as part of that, I just sort of wound up, and that's probably the right verb, wound up, having at my disposal a growing number of Titus Moody artifacts and elements. Some of his personal stuff, a lot of his photographs and proof sheets and negatives, a lot of materials from his films. I have from 3 different sources now. I have, so basically what I'm starting to call it is the Titus Moody archive. And a lot of it's sitting off to my left.
How did you get all this stuff? How did you get all this Titus Moody archive?
Well, I did a commentary for, and we were talking about this before we started filming, the Vinegar Syndrome Lost, what is it called, Lost Picture Show set, which has the Last of the American Hobos on it. So Joe Rubin from Vinegar Syndrome asked me to do a commentary on that. And I'd known about Titus a little bit, but that's really where I got Titusized. That was my, really deep into, and the film, and most of your viewers probably, hopefully have seen it. If not, they should get that set. It's still available, by the way. Look for a good sale because it's not cheap, but it is good price when you have it on sale. No more shilling. Yeah, I mean, the story behind that film and the story behind most of these films are really more fascinating than the films themselves. So in doing that, one of the companies that, one of the groups I was working with kind of sent me some stuff. And I almost think it might have been by accident because I had sent in some stuff to be scanned. And I think some of it might have just this other stuff might have came to me like, well, we don't know what to do with this. Let's just send it to Langrick. And then another box came. And then I happened to mention it to Lisa Petrucci, who is from Something Weird Video. And she's like, "Oh, I got a bunch of Titus Moody stuff that Mike had gotten, whenever one of the fellas from LA,
Michael Kopner, maybe?
Kopner, I think it was Kopner.
Yeah, okay.
He got a lot of Kopner stuff, and Titus Moody's stuff was part of that. So she sent me now 3 full boxes full of stuff, and she's got more. She said she just has to get to it in her incredible archive out at Casa Weird. So that's how I kind of, it started coming to me, and Lisa and others had sort of been not overtly, but very sort of passive aggressively hinting at, what are you going to do with it? And I'm like, you know what, this is a book. This truly is a book that needs to be written about Titus Moody and about kind of what he lived through. I hate to put it this way, but one of the analogies that I think is unfortunately kind of apt is he's almost the Forrest Gump of the cult film world. Because he's one of these guys that you wouldn't really think twice about, but he really was incredibly skilled, incredibly talented, and he was around for almost everything in some way from the late 50s up until 2001 when he died.
It's amazing. Go on.
Yeah, I mean, not necessarily mainstream stuff, although he did do mainstream stuff, which we can talk about. But certainly, I mean, he was a part of Timothy Carey's World's Greatest Sinner, which is a sort of a seminal film there. The Coleman Francis early films that you've mentioned there, and also the birth of pornography, modern pornography. Exactly. He was very much at the center of that when it started, and throughout into the at least the 90s.
I had a chance to meet him. I did not go to the Cult Movies Convention. I wish I had gone to that, but he didn't last much longer after that. And
that would have been early 2001, probably.
Yeah,
Is that the one
yeah. In fact, I was invited to go there, and family stuff, kids, little kids problems.
But he passed away a month or two after that.
And he got a Lifetime Achievement Award, which must have meant a tremendous amount to him at that time. All right. Everything.
I would love to know where that is, by the way. That's not part of the artifacts I currently have.
You talk about that box, because the last issue of Cult Movies magazine, Michael Kopner says, going through boxes, the late Titus Moede has left me. And I thought to myself, I'd like to see those boxes, and you got them. Okay.
I think I have them. Yeah, I absolutely do. I have some artifacts I've sort of pulled out, G-rated artifacts, if you want to take a look at them.
Yeah, let's look at them.
Just to give you an idea of some of the stuff that we have here. I'm putting my archive gloves on for this stuff. The first one, which I think is really, really neat and sort of fascinating, is a headshot of Titus. You guys can see that there. Mm-hmm. And it's got his, at that time, current CV on the back of it. And it's got a lot of his motion picture work from the 50s and 60s. It's got some of his television work. And then it's got his skills and so forth. This basically dates it up to probably 1970, 71. Mm-hmm. So that's where this probably comes from there. And an interesting thing is at the bottom, it's Frank West is who his agent is. Well, that was Titus. That was one of Titus's known.
He did an Andy Milligan thing here, right? He used other names.
He so did. Yeah, he so did. And the address, it goes back to Reb Sawitz's agency, Reb Sunset International, who that's where Titus worked out of. So yeah, the typical Titus showman. One other thing, and it reminds me, I should have started with this, Doug. Titus, I discovered very early on, is an unreliable witness to his own story. Mm-hmm. You cannot take what he's said in interviews or to people or wherever as fact. A lot of it was based on fact, but a lot of it was definitely Titusized. So you have to be very careful when you hear some of these stories. The next thing I'd like to show you is he kept a lot of scrapbooks. And this is a page from one, which shows some of the clippings he got from this one is from the Foothills Swing from 1963, and he's talking about one of Coleman Francis's films. And
okay, push it back a little bit. Closer to you. It's hard to see, though. The other ones I can see when you turn it around, though. The other pages. I can send you a scan of this if
you want to maybe put it on.
We might put it on. But I saw it a second ago. It must be just where they put it, more or less. But I saw skydivers on the back page.
It is, yeah. That's another one there that
I chickened out. I chickened out on skydivers. That's all.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, and this is a couple of in both of these. It's where early areas where he's talking about, he was making movies for Hollywood, and he was like, no, anyone can do this, and then he wasn't getting jobs, and a lot of you'll hear this a lot in the Titus, especially in the 60s. He basically was saying, look, if you can't get jobs, just get some friends together and make your own movie.
Well, that's how he made his two.
And that's what he did.
That's how he made the two documentaries, right?
It is, absolutely. It absolutely is. And to that point, we can move into, I have negatives of a lot of this stuff, not everything, unfortunately, but this is a negative, which I'm not taking out, of a kind of famous picture of Titus and his motorcycle. And I think this is the one that he famously...
Yeah, that's keep it lower, a little lower. You might be able to see it better. Yeah, right now, right there, yeah. Right there, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen that photo. It's quite iconic, actually, when you think about it.
It is, yeah. And again, the negative is right over there. Another neat one, I don't know, I think I have the negative, I didn't pull it out though, is this one.
Oh, that's with the what's her name again? She was in...
Liz Renee.
Liz Renee, she was in a whole bunch of films with... And that's his daughter, and she actually had a striptease act. But it was rather tragic because the daughter committed suicide at some point.
Yeah, that's Brenda Renee with her. Yeah,
I have seen that picture also in Cult Movies. I thought Titus was quite a handsome guy for a long time. You know that?
You know, one of the people I've reached out to is Mamie Van Doren. She's still alive, believe it or
Yeah,
not.
yeah.
She's 95 and still alive and still kicking, and still somewhat formidable, I might add. Because I didn't pull it out, but I do have a picture of him and her, and he was in uncredited one of her movies, the Las Vegas Hillbillies or something like that. Which is actually a better film than it sounds like. But he's a biker in that and uncredited in that film. So I reached out to her. I'm like, hey, do you remember working with? I know it was only once. I know it was 60 some years ago. But do you remember Titus Moody? And I sent her the picture. She's like, I don't remember him, but he sure was handsome.
You know, when I was reading Cult Movies magazine, Liz Renee wrote an article thanking Titus for an article he did about her. And everything.
Yep.
Yeah.
They were very close, supposedly. The story goes, and I've not found any evidence to back this up other than anecdotal. The story is when she got out of jail, the famous jail term she did for Mickey Cohen or
Mickey
whoever
Cohen,
it was,
yeah,
right?
Mickey Cohen.
Yeah, Titus actually had gotten hold of a limousine from one of the studios and picked her up from the prison in the limousine. Now, again, I don't have any evidence to back that up yet. It is marked, though, in ink on something that I'd like to try to validate for the story.
Well, you know, she worked hard on the Thrill Killers. She really did.
Yeah.
And he was great.
And that he loves talking about. He loved talking about that film because of the. That's the one where he was the cop, the motorcycle cop.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he was chasing a horse, and he just thought that was the most beautiful thing in the world.
I just watched that film a few days ago. I like it.
One final thing I'll show you out of the thing. This I don't think the actual negative. I think it's the thing that it's in. So this is the negative, and I'll show you the picture, and then we can get into maybe the talking about his movies. This is him and.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, that's good. That's good. Yeah.
And Peter Fonda.
Oh, Peter Fonda. Yeah, there he is, and there's Titus in the background, right?
Yep. So Titus's first movie that he actually wrote, directed, put together was Outlaw Motorcycles.
Yeah. Now tell me about. I watched that movie. You know, I have to admit, I found these things finally on YouTube. Spent years trying to. Yeah. And they'll probably be gone on YouTube in a year.
There's a good version of it on this, by the way, as an extra too.
I know. I need to convince my wife I can buy that. Okay, it's not for any kind of permanent reasons. It's for the money. Okay, that's the thing. But I will get it because I want to see your commentary. All right.
Oh, man, it's all right. It was an early one, so it's warts and all though. It's there.
But tell me about how long it took to make Outlaw Motorcycles. I heard this the part that has some nudity in it is staged, but you can see that some of them interact with the cops, right? Quite a bit in that movie.
There's. It's where he started this whole, you know, a lot of it is truly, you know, documentary archival stuff that he shot or that he got a hold of. But he did stage a lot of it, and he continued that. And I think staged even more, I'd say most of Last of the American Hobo. I think most of that is recreation and stage stuff. Although some of it, I mean, the stuff in Britt, Iowa was obviously he shot there when he went out there. So for Outlaws, I'm not sure. I haven't really dug into when it started and when things really happened on that from a timeline perspective yet. We'll get to that eventually, and hopefully before the book is, before I'm done with it there. I can tell you there was at least 3 versions of that film, though.
Really?
There was a version that he put together and released in 1966, at least in a couple of places. I think it premiered in San Francisco. And then it screened at least in one, maybe more locations in LA. And that was sort of version 1. And it was shorter and it did not have any of the nudity in it at that point. So what I believe happened is he kind of did that to basically get money to finish the film. Mm-hmm. And you know, this was, you have to remember, this was the first.
Yeah, that's what I love about the film. It's so before everything else.
It is, yeah. I mean, and that's why the Fonda thing is so great, because even Fonda had to admit it was inspiration for everything, all the other films up to and including Easy Rider that came after it. And you have to remember, this was also around the time, but really before Hunter Thompson's book Hell's Angels came out as well. So Titus was doing this kind of at the same time Hunter was writing his book.
I like the idea of filming on weekends, you know, and things like that whenever you could, you know, to get the stuff out.
one of the things that is real in that film, there's a scene of a bike rally, and you've got what's his name, Ed Wynn's son. He was in tons of Disney films. Kind of, he always had the big
Yeah, I know
mustache.
who he is.
He was a Hollywood biker, one of the rich guys. He's there talking to Titus in one of the scenes, and you can see in the background the Watts riots, the smoke coming from the Watts riots in L.A.
Yeah. And also, I don't know if it's manufactured or not, but there's genuine tension between the bikers and the police officers in that film.
That was real, and in some articles, Titus talks about how it was easier actually to deal with the bikers than it was the cops, which, you know, around that time, and if you read Thompson's book, it's obvious, but it's also very interesting how that dynamic worked out. So you had the early '66 release. Titus did get more money to finish the film, but the deal by then was you need to heat it up. So he shot at least one other scene of the biker getting a tattoo, I think, and there's some topless stuff there. Gordon
Barclay, right? Barclay.
Is in that, and we'll come back to him if you want to in a minute because he's important. He's in that scene, so you know it's staged. I mean, he wasn't a tattoo artist. I can guarantee you that. And in the background, you can actually see posters for Outlaw Motorcycles, the film you're watching.
You know, I got to watch it again. Because I missed that. You know, I think I think the tattoo on the butt is kind of iconic. I think a little bit.
It definitely is. Yeah. So that was the second version. And then the third version, and I think it is a distinct version, is the version he put together for his Titus Moody classics in the 90s, which we've talked about already. You know, he in the 90s, he went back to, and him and Jim Bryan, actually, who we can talk about as well. Him and Jim Bryan got together and said, hey, let's re-release our movies. So it was Outlaw Motorcycles, Last of the American Hobos, Dirtiest Game in the World, and then 2 or 3 other Jim Bryan films, of what I call his Venice films from the early 70s. Yeah. And for the Titus ones especially, they shot these bumpers at the beginning and end of Titus and Chi-Chi, his little chihuahua, his son, basically, or his daughter, actually. It was a she. Doing something as an intro and then something at the end of the film, they come back and there's usually a trivia question attached to it. It's hokey, it's corny, it's wonderful.
Well, didn't he make a movie called Chi-Chi's Night Out also?
There's a handful of Chi-Chi's. There's Chi-Chi's Night Out. There's Chi-Chi Goes to the Rock Shop. I've got a copy of it over to the side here. And these are I don't have Chi-Chi's Night Out. I haven't seen that. I don't have it yet. If anyone wants to send me a copy, wink, wink, hint, hint, I would love that. But Chi-Chi Goes to the Rock Shop, I'm sure it's exactly the same type of thing. Chi-Chi's barely in it. And it's basically Titus and a few others. In fact, I know one of the guys that was at one of these things at the Rock Shop. The Rock Shop, I don't know if you know what that was. It was a kind of a record store on Hollywood Boulevard.
I grew up in Southern California. I do remember it. Yeah, Rock. Yeah. Yeah,
it's where the original Peaches Records was before it. So it's right there on Hollywood Boulevard. And they would have these shows in there, and it would be strippers. Sharon Mitchell is in one of them, and it's basically just Titus with a video camera filming these performances.
That's interesting.
Which is an incredible artifact to have.
It's like a time capsule, of the time period.
It is. So to finish out the Outlaw Motorcycles, the third version, speaking of Sharon Mitchell, he not only added those bumpers, he also changed the soundtrack. And at the beginning, and I think this is the one that might be on YouTube, so this might be the one you've seen, Doug, that he added a theme song of her. She had a band, a punk band, and they actually are the intro when the bikers come, flailing in at the beginning of the movie there. It's her group singing over this. So there's 3 distinct copies of that film.
Now let's talk about Last of the American Hobos. Boy, it took me forever to find that movie. Oh well, of course I can include that I was too cheap to buy it. All right, but It took about 3 years to make. I see Bruno Visoda in that film. I see Coleman Francis in it. I'm blown away by some of the settings, like in the flop houses and other places and on the railroads. Did he use any sets at all for that movie?
He did. I think some of the Joe Hill and some of those later scenes, I think those are sets. some of the elements I have, I think, are from that, but for another film. So what I'm thinking happened is there was another film going on for these. He obviously didn't pay for these to build these and all this stuff. I think another film was going on. He may or may not have been somehow involved as the on-set photographer or something like that. And he basically said, "Hey, we're going to come in over the weekend and we're going to shoot these scenes." I think that's how he got the more elaborate scenes there. One of the early scenes when they're in downtown Hollywood, Skid Row, those scenes, you actually, and it's hard to see on it's good. You can see it on the latest, the recent scan, the 2K scan, but on all the other versions before that, you can't really tell what it is. But it was the original Hard Rock Cafe.
Really? Oh.
So not related to the Hard Rock Cafe that we know, but there was an actual Hard Rock Cafe in downtown LA that the guys that created the Hard Rock Cafe sold the whole name from. So that's where that's the street corner that they're starting at.
Now I got to ask you something. Is that a real beard he's wearing?
I don't think so. I think yes and no. I think in parts of the film it is. But there are a few scenes where it's very obvious that that's not. And he may have done that for continuity. He may have done it because, hey, I don't want to show up in every scene. I want to try to disguise I don't know why.
Well, I love the movie. I also like Gordon Barclay. He's eating or something, and he's just full of anger over a situation in life. That was a kind of
Gordon Barclay is going to have a big part in the book. So Gordon Barclay was Scottish. He was born in Scotland, and he was a bit older than Titus. He did some theater in Scotland before he immigrated to the United States. And when he immigrated, he joined the army and was like a tank commander or in a tank in the Korean War for the United States. Then after that, he came back in LA, and he met Titus at an acting class that was happening at Hollywood High, a night class that was happening at Hollywood High in the very late 50s, like 58, 59. And they stayed friends and co-workers in a lot of cases through the rest of Titus's life.
Oh, yeah.
So Gordon actually shows up in, maybe behind the scenes in at least one of the Coleman Francis films, the early films. He has a writing credit and a producing credit, I think, for Hobos. Of course, he's in Outlaws. He actually was in Titus's first hardcore film, which was called The Whip and the Chain, which is a very hard film to watch, both to find as well as to get through whenever you see it. It was well before its time, I'll put it that way. And you can guess what I mean by the title, or not, and you're a better, or not, and you're a better person than I am if you can. But in a non-sexual role. And then he also was in a film. I love the title, which is why I got to bring this up. A late 80s shot on video with Jack Baker. It was a Jack Baker film, but Titus basically put it all together, and it was called The Climb to Sex Dome 3.
I saw that in IMDb. Let me tell you something. The Cult Movies article, they talked about the end of Jack Baker's life is very moving. Yeah. Him and Titus were very close, and I don't know if they go to it in that. I mean, Titus took care of him, but he had also taken care of Titus through an illness as well earlier on there. So they were, and the three of them, I think, were kind of like brothers. Maybe that's too strong. I don't know yet, but they definitely. And Titus and Jack Baker started out in the 70s, so just about 10. He had 10 more years with Barclay, but still, I think the three of them were pretty close for the last 30 years of their lives there. What kind of relationship did Titus have with Coleman Francis and Ray Dennis Steckler?
Well, Francis, so I can tell you. I've interviewed at length, and I'm actually still on a regular basis talk with James Bryan, who directed Dirtiest Game and some of the other films Titus was in. And we've talked about Francis a little bit, and he said that he first met Coleman Francis, he was sleeping on Titus's couch. Yeah, Francis had gotten into some bad trouble. There's a Ray Dennis Steckler film where Steckler picked him up off the street and gave him a role. Yeah, you know the funny story. The sort of the tragic story about that is he picked him up, gave him the role, in part because he wanted to give him some money to do, but also because he wanted kind of a bum for that scene. Well, what he did was he went out, he got himself cleaned up and got a shave and got a haircut, and he comes in and he looks great, and he's like, oh, come on, you ruined the effect. Of course, he still didn't see him and gave him the money, but yeah. So Mr. Bryan also said that because Coleman Francis plays a big part in Dirtiest Game. Yeah, he is. he said that he was basically a drunk by that point, and he would, if you were shooting in someone's house, he would spend his time when he wasn't on camera trying to find where they hid the liquor.
You know, there's
And
there's a movie to be made of Coleman Francis, but I don't know how many people want to see it, or a book, but it is fascinating.
there is a book. One of the things that Mr. Bryant told me that I don't think I'd heard elsewhere is that Coleman had been fighting to get, I guess, a VA pension for years, and when he eventually got it, and when he got it, was basically a windfall of money, and he said that was really the end of it. You know, he got that, and he just went on a weeks or months long bender. He disappeared. I don't know if that's what led up to his unfortunate end, or if that was a little. I think it was around that time frame, and it may have been related to what happened to him in the end.
Sounds like a Leaving Las Vegas type of thing,
Yeah. So I got the impression that Coleman was living on Francis's couch for a period.
You mean Titus's couch, right? Titus's couch.
Yeah. Sorry, yeah. Titus's couch. Yeah, Titus's couch.
I want to say something about James Bryant. I'm about 2 miles or 3 miles away from where he shot Don't Go in the Woods Alone, because he shot it in Ogden, Utah, out in the canyon.
Yep.
Yeah. And I've seen that movie. We reviewed it in Plan 9 Crunch. Video Nasty, that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, he relishes in all of that. He truly does. The Dirtiest Game, you've seen that now.
Yeah, thanks to you.
And I know I got the impression it was not a favorite of yours.
Well, I love the first 10 minutes. Okay, give me that. All right.
I can see that. But everything beyond that is what he really enjoys, though.
Yeah.
Just taking everything to the limit and then beyond. And certainly, remember, this was shot in 1969.
Yeah, very.
Those scenes with Titus and Gene Stone, while not hardcore, are pretty hardcore. I think you would agree.
Well, the very end is shocking to me. I've never seen that.
That's exactly what he wants. He said he wanted a punch to the gut. And it still gives you that, I think, today. Even if I watched it leading up to this to refresh myself. It's still I knew it was coming, and it's still like, oh my God, that's harsh.
It was.
And one of the guys that's pervasive in that film was Frank Millen, who was one of Jim Bryan. He was basically Jim Bryan's version of Gordon Barclay. They met at UCLA, and I think Frank was in every one of Jim's films, or Mr. Bryan's films, I should say. Not the hardcore films that he wound up shooting for Swedish Erotica and some of his early ones, but all of his mainstream, or let's say cult films. I think Frank was in every one of those until he passed away. So
that's cool. I just love Coleman Francis in that movie as the man behind the candidate, and stuff like that, and all that stuff.
So Jim Bryan's next film is called Escape the Passion, and he wrote a part specifically for Coleman Francis for that film. And unfortunately, this was right before Francis got his VA money and disappeared. So he was nowhere to be found when they wanted to film. So Mr. Bryan got a guy that is very similar, although no one's going to be Coleman Francis.
Yeah.
This guy kind of looks like him, kind of acts like him, but he doesn't have the Coleman, whatever charisma or whatever there. He does a good job, but it's watching that and knowing that was written for Coleman Francis. It's a missed opportunity, I think, for that film and for us fans.
Well, I think I told you in a message that Dirtiest Game reminded me that it came before The Candidate.
It did,
and it's about the destruction of idealism of a politician. They're not the same movie, obviously, but the beginning is. And I just thought that was pretty interesting. I think a lot of these low-budget filmmakers, like I just saw Kiss Me, Kiss Me, Kiss Me, Kiss Me, Kiss Me, whatever, that's 4 or 5. And it reminded me of films I saw in the 70s, like Diary of a Mad Housewife or Indiscretion of an American Wife. Sometimes I think these low-budget softcore films actually sort of set a trend later.
Well, again, we go back to Outlaw Motorcycles. That was the first biker film, and you ended up with Easy Rider that changed filmmaking. And that's why I think folks like Titus and Coleman. A lot of people know Coleman Francis from his becomes acting. But he was before Titus. He was before Cassavetes even. He was doing these films, these low, no budget films. Are they great? No, they're not, but they exist, and he did them, and that's the point. And Skydivers and what the Red Cuba one or whatever, they're not great films, but I think they definitely influence films to come after.
Where else can you see
And
John Carradine sing in a movie? All right.
Well, there's that, I guess.
No, I like the movies, and in fact, I once didn't like Red Zone Cuba, but I've seen one thing about cult films: if you see them long enough, you become fond of them. All right, and I think that's true. Now, maybe
I think
Mono's Hands of Fate hasn't worked on me yet, but yeah, most of them.
Well, so there's some you can't win, I guess. There.
Yeah.
So one of the, if you want to talk a little bit about Dirtiest Game a little bit more, I can go into.
Yeah, tell me more about it, because it's the one film. It's the film I think that is the cult waiting to be maybe perhaps discovered more even. All right.
I hope so. Well, what kind of, after talking with Mr. Bryan so much, we've talked almost on a weekly basis for months now, which is it's a gift to me.
Can I mention one thing? Can I mention one thing? Years ago, I found on the internet a long interview with James Bryan about Dirtiest Game. You probably have it. I read it once and haven't been able to find it since, but it was interesting. But go on now.
There was one. It's probably the one you're thinking of. That's no longer the website's gone, and it wasn't like archived. Yeah, and I think I know that. And there was a lot of behind the scenes photos from the film as well. Yeah. I've talked with him a lot about. Hopefully, I've got all the stuff that missed. So this is kind of one of the things that's happening with the Titus project. Is as I'm talking to people like Mr. Bryan, other things, tangential things, and I have to be careful because I have to focus on getting this Titus thing done, but I'm also not missing the opportunity of spending time and getting access to folks like Mr. Bryan while I can.
Yeah, definitely.
But before he finds out I'm a fake and an imposter, and he stops taking my calls or whatever there. So it was a Jim Bryan film. The theory that Titus co-directed it is not real. Titus didn't direct it. He started sort of claiming he did part of it, and Mr. Bryan's like, sure, whatever, fine, I don't care. It didn't bother him that Titus did that, but it was a Jim Bryan film from the beginning. He did get with Titus early on to help him put the film together and to get people for the film. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the folks, like Gene Stone, I believe, got through Titus. But also a lot of the other folks that you see in that film, especially at the pool party, are part of the Jim Bryan cabal.
Menagerie or something? Yeah.
Well, he basically had this little group of people that go back to the UCLA days.
Wow.
Like Frank Millen was one, but there are others. And there's other people that sort of became part of the Jim Bryan troupe, if you will, for a period. And you've got 4 films. You've got Dirtiest Game. You've got Escape to Passion, which I've mentioned. You've got I Love You Not. And then the 4th film, I would say, that kind of ends that. There's a few films in between, but Boogie Vision kind of ends out what I call the Jim Bryan Venice films. Mm-hmm. They're all, for the most part, shot in Venice, California, in or around Venice, Marina del Rey, Santa Monica area. A lot of them, especially the earlier ones, are shot around Market Street. Mr. Bryan had a studio, a building, a multi-story building that was basically his studio. Mm-hmm. And you can see that very clearly in some of the other films. The house that it was shot at, and a lot of Dirtiest Game was shot, Gene Stone's house. That's all of this stuff's still there, by the way, really? in Venice. And later on, Fade to Black, I think was the name of the film, was also shot in that. Mr. Bryan wasn't related to that film, but it was shot in that. So at the pool party, a lot of the folks that you see at behind the scenes sort of hanging out at the pool or whatever show up in bigger roles in his later films.
No kidding. That's interesting.
And actually, I didn't notice this until earlier this week when I watched the film again. Gene Stone pops up very briefly, like for 2 or 3 clips there in the background, and she's not supposed to be in the film yet. So there's like a little blooper there. I'm going to bring it up to Mr. Bryan next time we speak, hopefully later this week or next week there. So it was a Jim Bryan film. He got to Titus, said, hey, let's make this film together. That's how he got Coleman Francis, is from Titus. Gene Stone is a very interesting character. She's Australian. and her family was Bolsheviks, very committed Bolsheviks.
I heard that somewhere. I thought she's good in the movie. All right.
She was, yeah, I wish there was more of her that we could see in other films. She did do some other films. She has a brief part in Escape the Passion, and I'll get to why she's in that film in a minute. So her family was Bolsheviks in Australia. When Stalin died, this is how committed they were, Doug. When Stalin died and there was hope for a kind of a Bolshevik resurgence in Russia, they immigrated to Russia.
Wow.
And lived in Russia for a period until it became clear this version of Bolshevism was not it wasn't there. So they immigrated back to Australia. And she was, by the late 60s, she was on her way from Australia to Israel. She was going to live in a commune in Israel. And she was stopped in LA to kind of earn more money to get the rest of the way on the trip. And that's where she started doing exotic dancing and stripping, although her style of that, from what I've heard, was a little different. She would strip, and then she'd start lecturing about communism or about politics or things like that, which, I don't know. Yeah, that would have been interesting to see.
My wife was born in communist Hungary. We met in the United States, but they were dissidents, so she has have some idea what it was like. I also noticed Natalie Rogers came from a Bolshevik family.
Really?
Yeah, if you listen to it, may have been Stephen Thrower, I think, who talked about it. But it's interesting. That's very interesting. I can imagine someone doing some exotic dance and then giving an anti-communist lecture afterward.
And that's not the first kind of thing that period in LA when toplessness and then bottomlessness was kind of new. There were other sort of weird things like that going. Sometimes they were driven by, well, this isn't, this is art. This isn't like, bad stuff.
Yeah.
Where there's a redeeming element. I think she was doing it because she was a committed Bolshevik, though.
Hey, I wanted to mention also, you told me, and I have a friend who goes through all these newspaper archives for me. You told me that I always thought Dirtiest Games just played Pussycat, but you told me no, and you're right. I found it all over the country, playing across.
They're all over the country. Actually, I'm glad you mentioned that. This is one thing Mr. Bryan is especially proud of. He said there was a bar in Washington, D.C. that bought a print from him and would play it constantly. And they played it till basically the film fell apart. And he said it was very popular at this Washington, D.C. bar.
All these inebriated congressmen enjoying the movie. I get this mindset of it. I noticed doing some research for the thing when I was doing a review of Last American Hobos that Titus would periodically put ads in the paper for Hobo Stew, which I found interesting.
Yeah. The ad, the promotion for Last American Hobo is kind of its own little story there. Titus, of course, had his Frank West public relations, which actually goes back to the early 60s. And he did a lot of his own promotion, but he had a couple other guys that also really liked to do that. Hale Smith, who played a couple of roles in the film, he did his own promotion, which I'm sure you might not have seen, but I do talk about in the commentary. He basically was going to walk from somewhere in California all the way to like Boston or Maine or whatever, promoting the film.
Yeah, I read that, something about that.
Yeah. I don't know that Titus was on board with that, because evidently when he got to Britt, Iowa, they got into some big argument about, I guess, promotion and how, and they kind of broke up for it. He didn't never finish the walk after the Britt, Iowa thing. And they did get back together. I understand later on that they made up, if you will. But there was some kind of, they were not together on the promotion for the film.
Because I do remember go on.
I was going to say that's one of the very few, in fact, it's the only right now instance where I found Titus getting actually upset about something.
But did he have any kind of relationship with Ray Dennis Steckler? Because Steckler sometimes would get in spats with people.
Well, I've not dug into that other than, what we kind of know, just sort of, on the surface too much. Carolyn Brandt did I think it was a Cinema Wasteland thing a few years ago, right around the time I think it might even be included. I hope it is on the Steckler set that came out from Severin. But she did an interview for, I think it was Cinema Wasteland, and she talked a little bit. She mentioned Titus one time, the Rat Finka Boo Boo film, where the person's getting calls from threatening calls from a. She said that was based on, that really happened to her, and Ray. Someone would call up and claim that Ray was sleeping with his sister, the guy's sister that was calling, and she jokingly said he probably was, because Steckler was known for that, right? Well, she said later on, Ray said, that was Titus that was doing that.
You know what?
So
I do remember that, because my co-blogger bought that set and we were watching all the interviews. Yeah.
Yeah. So I can assure you, though, that Ray Dennis Steckler was not sleeping with Titus's sister, because I've talked with her.
Okay.
she's one of the people that's still with us. She's 88, I think now, but she is still with us, and I have had the opportunity to interview her 4 or 5 times now.
That's good.
And we kind of skipped over all his younger life, which is fine, but a lot of people don't know he's a twin. This is his twin sister.
No, I did not know that myself.
Yeah, she's oldest, and by a minute or two, I think, 90 seconds, I think. But so Titus and Sharon is his sister's name. She is still with us. I just sent her a birthday greeting a few weeks ago. So I got a lot of good information about them growing up and their high school days, and also throughout life. I mentioned one of the things that I found out from her, which kind of floored me. She lived, and I think she still does, in Colorado, and Titus and Chi-Chi went to visit them in the 80s, I think. And she said, this is one of the things she regrets not doing with Titus. He offered to take her up to, I forget where it is, but where Hunter Thompson lived in Colorado, because he was going to see him for the day, and because they knew each other. Wow. I don't know that they knew each other back in the 60s when they were both doing their biker things. I would love, and I really hope I can find out that they did. It makes sense that they would, but I don't know when they met each other, but they did know each other.
Now, going back to his earlier days, you can tell me if this is fact or fiction. Was he a really good baseball player?
Yes, he was.
Okay.
He was good in all the sports.
Did he have an accident in his motorcycle that caused a lot of problems?
So this is where we get into that. He's an unreliable witness, I think.
Okay.
Yes, he was good in baseball and in basketball and in track and most of the other sports that his high school went to 2 that they had. Yes, he did have a motorcycle accident. No, I do not believe that he has had a chance to try out for the Washington Senators as the team that I've heard the rumor on. However, and this is coming from his sister, because she's like, I'd never heard that. So if she hadn't heard that he had an opportunity, I'm pretty confident that he didn't have that. However, he wasn't the only guy on the motorcycle when it wrecked. There was a guy that he'd picked up, and they were actually going to a graduation event. And what happened is a car door opened, and they hit the car door and went careening. And the other guy that he was with, he was a better baseball player. She said, I think he may actually have had a tryout at that. He may or may not have missed because of the injuries. He was injured a lot more. Titus made it to the event. He wasn't injured really that much at all. The other guy, she said, was in the hospital. So what I think we might be seeing here is a little bit of Titus taking something from his past and sort of adopting and making it part of his mythology there.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, that was before the internet was even pondered, so he had no idea that people like me would be doing what I'm doing here.
Well, 30, 40 years ago, I believe Ed Wood was fighting wounded, in the Pacific. He was in the Pacific, but he wasn't fighting. He was picking up dead bodies. But
and he probably wasn't wearing women's underwear either.
Yeah. Titus had a lot of good roles early in his career. I mean, roles that you would see of somebody who could potentially become a Fonda or a Nicholson. Yeah. But he didn't quite get over that hump, did he?
He didn't. I think I watched the Twilight Zone episode where he's a gravedigger. I watched that with my daughter over at Christmas break. She'd like, hey, I want to watch this this Twilight Zone thing, and I'm like, okay, we watched it. It was great. I'm like, I got one now. I want to watch with you, because then I'm like, this is the guy I've been talking about here. So I got to show her Titus through that. But he was great in that. I think part of it, Doug, was what I alluded to earlier. He kind of got, I think, disillusioned with the whole thing, and how you had to. I don't know. I'm reading into this. This is me speaking, not Titus, but I could see him getting disillusioned with what you got to do to become the next Fonda and all of that stuff, and he really was more of, I'm just going to go make my own films, which he did.
He did, yes.
And then at some point he got to where he was making his own dirty films, and then it was a different story, I will say, though, he did have a career, brief through the 70s anyway, with Hollywood studios. He was kind of the go-to guy when a major production needed a stag film or a dirty movie or whatever playing in the background or whatever. They'd go to Titus and say, yeah, hey, can you give us something that's 2 minutes or whatever? And he pulled in Bill Margold to do a lot of those on screen.
That's interesting. Hey, I want to ask you, the Rat Finka Boo Boo ends in my hometown, and I just love the scene, where they're at the parade. I'm wondering, did they crash that, or did they make an arrangement to be in it?
I don't know for sure, but I would bet you a good lunch that they crashed it. I don't see any of that group doing anything above board when it comes to getting permission to do, unless there was some promotion tied to it. Unless, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
If there was some promotion, like they were getting paid to do this, or there was some quid pro quo, I could see that. But I think that was probably more of a let's go film this while the parade's going on thing.
What do you think Titus's best acting performances were, in your opinion?
I truthfully haven't seen everything. His early work, like you said, is really good. A lot of his non-speaking work early on is good too. He was more of, I think, a visual. When you get to where he's having to do like talking, I think it breaks down a little bit. His performance in Dirtiest Game is, I think, a good example of that, where it's very. I think you might have mentioned this when we were chatting. It's very sort of labored almost when he's talking, and I don't know. I think he was kind of like that when he was having to act. So I think
he's a face you want to see. All right, I think in the Thrill Killers, I thought maybe the most forceful he was. He's sort of submissive because he's supposed to be in Rat Finka Boo Boo. He's the bad guy in Skydivers, but he doesn't seem to play with much passion in that movie. I watched it.
Yeah, I think he really enjoyed. I think I don't know this, and I may go back on this as I get into this further, thinking about these things. I have a suspicion he might have found that he liked being behind the camera more than in front of the camera. Yeah, which is where he was for most of his career. Certainly the post '60s, he was. I mean, we will never know the number of films and videos that had Titus Moody behind the camera or otherwise.
Well, I recall reading a review of a film I haven't seen called Beach Blanket Bango, where just as an aside, the reviewer says, "Oh, by the way, Titus Moody is a policeman." So did he do a lot of films like that?
That's a Jim Bryan film.
Oh, is it?
That's one of Jim Bryan's films that happened. That between his. The third and the fourth Venice film, right? Mm-hmm. Although some of it was filmed in the Venice area. That's the Renee Bond film. Got Rick Lutz and other. And it started out as a softcore, but that was when it basically became you're going to need to shoot more scenes, sort of thing. So it turned into something harder there. But yeah, he shows up very briefly as a cop. He's in Escape to Passion, also as a cop, very briefly, but in a somewhat comedic and memorable scene. So you do see him, and like I mentioned, the Mamie Van Doren film, the Las Vegas Hillbillies. Mm-hmm. That's a cameo basically. He's uncredited. He has no speaking parts. He has a real beard in that one, but he's very Titus in the background.
Okay, I wanted to ask you. I want to get into the book, but I want to ask you one more thing. Titus's California era. Have you talked to anybody, from Cult Movies magazine and things like that?
Not yet. I'm still early on this, and I got lucky in that I found and got access to his sister, which for obvious reasons I wanted to spend as much time as possible on. The same with Mr. Bryan, and again that kind of grew its own story, and it's still ongoing with him. But yes, there's a number. I've got an incredible list of folks identified that I want to reach out to, talk to, be with, perhaps those that didn't know him. So you've had at least one guy
Buddy
on the show.
Barnett, we talked briefly about him, on that.
Yeah, he's definitely a guy that I really do need to reach out to and try to get in contact with for obvious reasons.
I think he was close to Michael Kopner, but Kopner's not on social media anymore, but he's still alive, I believe. He might have some things to talk about, perhaps.
I do have, and I kind of knew this guy a little bit. I forget how we got to know each other on Facebook, but and some of the materials I have came from him. He did know Titus in the 90s very well, and in fact did some stuff with him, and he shows up behind the scenes in some of those last films or last videos.
Vampire Hunters Club and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, I think he might have been involved with that. There's a couple very sort of similar ones right towards the end there that Titus had cameos. They were basically cameos in those. But this guy, John Moser, I don't know if you know him.
The name sounds familiar. I just don't know him. I know you. I'm sure you've seen the Cult Movies TV interview with him, right?
Yeah, I do. I've got that. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
that was interesting to watch. I really enjoyed seeing it.
It is, and it's a great example of, again, Titus sort of, making up his own mythology in a couple of places there.
Yes. It's a video, people did that. Valda Hansen created whole different lives for herself, Yeah.
And that's what makes this story that much more interesting, though, is trying to get to the truth of it, but also not like downplaying or making. It's not negative to me that he did that.
No, it's not negative to me either.
Part of the story.
Part of the show. I mean, I'm reading a biography of Criswell right now. And that guy was quite the fabulous.
Canfield's, right?
What?
Canfield's book?
Yeah, well, it's a book. It's really long, and I can't remember his name, but I'm interviewing him in May, the author. Okay, so.
Yeah. It's a good book. Yeah, I really enjoyed that. We're connected as a result of that. We're connected, and there's you've probably seen it already. There's Titus shows up in that.
Well, I haven't got there yet. I'm still like in 1953. But I'm loving the book. I'm excited to find out Titus is in it. Well, I know Criswell and Titus were tight because Criswell, the thing that you probably have in your box, I saw and I posted on my review because I had a copy out of Cult Movies magazine where Criswell touts Last of the American Hobo. I think he misspells Titus's name though or something. It was that old newspaper that's defunct now, the Hollywood Examiner or something.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Criswell was incredible doing that type of stuff. Criswell played a part in Outlaw Motorcycles. He helped with the funeral scene. He wasn't in it, no, but he helped coordinate the funeral scene.
Oh, he played a part in making the movie. Okay.
Yeah, and then in Last of the American Hobos, there's a very brief scene of a boxcar with a casket in it.
I remember that scene.
That was Criswell's casket.
Of
his caskets.
Damn, I wish I might.
And I've got there's pictures, and there's one in the book actually, and I think I have the negative for that picture that's in the book of Criswell and Titus and Hale Smith and I think Paul Marco. I could be wrong on that. I could be misremembering that. But there's another couple of guys that are in that picture. In that train car, and of course you don't see them in the movie, but that was Criswell's as well.
Isn't it amazing about how nothing ever ends because so much more can be discovered about people like Milligan and Wood and Criswell and Titus Moody, and you just never stop learning about them. I mean,
that's right.
Yeah. I mean,
no, I was gonna say that, and that's what keeps guys like me going.
Yeah.
Is there's always, there could be a great big find, but it's not the last one. There's always, and typically those lead to a whole new wing of the building you didn't even know existed, and that's wonderful. Gives me something to do, I guess.
Well, it's worth doing. I'm a big fan of the comic actor Guy Kibbe. You may not even know who he is, but
I don't.
He's best known as the Governor in what's that movie with Jimmy Stewart where he has the filibuster, but.
Mr. Smith Goes to
Washington. But he's in a whole bunch of comedy films, and I want to do a book on him someday. 30 people will buy it probably. But there's so much to learn about these things, And tell me how your book might be formatted when you get it going?
Well, I've got a whole. I said if I'm going to do this, I need to have something. I need to have a sort of a framework to do this on, and I've got this whole framework around how there's going to be the early years, the early Hollywood years, the underground years, the adult film years, and then the later years. So it's kind of right now it's going to be broken up, and I've got a whole. I put together a wiki, like Wikipedia, but it's a privately hosted wiki, and this is how I'm ingesting all of the materials. I'm cataloging everything in that, and then when I do interviews or when I do research, it all goes in there, so it's all linked together and everything. And I've got the outline in there. And what I try to do when I have like an article I put together, I'll put I'll link it to the section of the book I think it's going to be a part of.
Okay.
So that I had to ask the question, what's the voice? And I don't. All this is going to change, Doug. So what I'm telling you now, when the book finally comes out, it could be totally different. But right now, the voice is, is it going to be kind of like Rudy Gray's book? Is it going to be an oral history? And no, it's not. One reason is because most of the people are dead now. So it's hard to get oral history out of dead people, unless you're certain people in our industry who make things up. But I'm not one of those. So so it can't really be an oral history. So it's going to have to be more of a matter of fact thing. It's not going to. I'm going to try to keep my voice out of it, but we'll see how that goes. I'm terrible at that. So, it's going to be broken up. Right now, it's going to be broken up in that ways, and certainly some of these sections are going to be bigger than others. The early years probably not that substantial, although there is a lot there that I've gotten from his sister. And by the way, the guy that was on the motorcycle that was on the accident with him, he's still alive, I believe. Mrs. Titus's sister remembered his name, and I think I've found him.
Good.
And he's kind of at the top of my next tranche of people to try to make sure he is still around and interview him. So that section is growing. Now, what I don't want to do is have a 1,000-page book either, which I could easily do. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes.
What's interesting is Dolores Fuller said about Ed Wood, he was an American original. Okay, he had lots of flaws. I think Titus Moody is an American original also.
Absolutely.
There's so much interesting stuff about him out there. And Michael Kaufner once wrote about people who occupy, I don't want to say the wrong word, but sort of the outskirts of Hollywood. And he mentioned Titus Moody, who go on living their lives, not getting any recognition, but creating all these amazing things. They're not getting the recognition maybe they deserve. And so that's what's so valuable, to find out more information about a fascinating person, because they shouldn't just waste away and everything. I wanted to ask you, what do you think his best movie performance was?
Titus Moody?
Yeah.
Oof. Again, I'm terrible at those types of things. I really am. And it's been a while since I saw a lot of the 60s films, the Steckler stuff especially. The answer is probably one of the Steckler films. I couldn't tell you which one, though. And this, you've hit on one of my weakest points, Doug, which is I get far more in depth on the background than the actual stuff on the screen.
Well, that's a good point, because if you follow these 60s filmmakers, with the exception of Millikan perhaps, I find the lives of Barry Mahan or Novak or Friedman far more fascinating than the films they made.
I think I suffer from that to a degree. But that's not to discount the films. That's why we're here. That's why we're still talking about these folks. So, but I'm a bad judge of what a good film is, or a bad film, or a good performance, or bad performances. Anyway, there are some recent Oscar winners that I think are just terrible actors or actresses. So what do I know?
I don't know. I'll get in my soapbox now. Yeah. We don't dig beautiful actors anymore. Okay, that's one thing I might say. But I really enjoyed talking about this. I'm trying to rack my brains, because there's more. I think you both you realize this too. There's more to know about the last years of Titus Moody. I mean,
there is, and part of what I do have, and this is, I've gone through all this, and it was very hard, and I don't know why I have it, but I do. Is a lot of his medical records from the last decade of his life. It's not comprehensive at all, and unfortunately, because you have a little bit, so you want to know really the rest of the story. But he lived, that last decade was really rough for him.
Well, Michael Kaufner, Yeah, go on. I'm sorry. Go on. I shouldn't have cut you off. Go
I
on.
was going to say both physically and financially, it was very, very rough for him that last decade.
Because Buddy Barnett told me he might have been living in his office.
His
at the
office.
end. Yeah.
I believe that to be true. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Michael Kopner wrote about how he missed getting a daily phone call from Titus every day.
I can only tell you the jealousy, the
Yeah,
envy, I guess, is the word on that.
So part of that missing that Cult Movies convention was hurts because I would have also met Kathy Wood, which I didn't meet, of course, and all these.
Can you imagine? Can you imagine being at that? I mean, my goodness.
They asked me to review a couple. They were going to give me a couple films to review. I'm a very minor writer, okay, but I didn't get there, and it was just John Agar. I would love to have met him too. That would have been great, stuff like that. And
one of the things I can one of the things I can tell you about. I have some. I don't know what they are. They're sort of like advertisements for Chi-Chi, the dog, the Chihuahua, Titus's Chihuahua, to be in movies and stuff. And this and on one of these and in another area, Titus references a movie that he just made up that Chi-Chi was in, and then one that anyway. Long story short on this, what I want to get to is. He gives a phone number on the back of this to contact Titus, the Chi-Chi's owner, if people want to use Chi-Chi in the films. And then he also says can also be contacted at Barney's Beanery if the phone is disconnected.
That's great. That's great.
So that's kind of gives you an idea of where Titus was.
Well,
stable-wise.
I often wondered how did he neglect his prostate cancer, if indeed that's what he died of, because that takes a long time.
That's part of what, hopefully the folks that are still around that did know him during that period, and maybe that's one reason I'm avoiding it as well, is because that last decade is going to be hard to go through.
Yeah, it's going to be bittersweet, that's for sure. We've only got a few more minutes until they cut me off here. I wanted to ask you, I have not seen The Only House in Town, but you provided commentary for the Hardwood set, which I don't have too, by the way, but what was that like?
So between me and Greg Javer, who did that whole set, put that whole set together, and he passed away a couple of years ago now. I think between us and I think now that he's gone, and actually I did another version of that commentary updated that didn't make it on the disc, which was I'm still not happy about, but I'm happy in as much as the version that did make it on the disc is me and Greg talking, and so that record now is out there forever. Now that it's beautiful that Greg's gone. Now that Greg is gone, to have that out there. I would also prefer my version because it's more correct and more comprehensive to be out there. But I think I can very truthfully, honestly, and unfortunately say I have watched and spent more time looking at Only House in Town than any human being in history has or ever should. It's not a good film. It was completed. I mean, there's a lot of rumors around that it was completed. It was released. It did screen multiple towns, multiple places. So it was out there. And it was wood. I can guarantee you that it was wood because I tracked that. One, I identified the house it was shot in.
Okay.
And that then led me to, I already knew, once I discovered the house, and I discovered it because I was doing commentary for Hollywood 90028, a Christine Hornisher film. Mm-hmm. And part of that has a montage of all these houses in Echo Park and Bunker Hill and those areas that were being torn down at the time. Mm-hmm. So I was trying to identify all of those as part of my commentary. Well, long story short on this, it happened to be the house, one of those happened to be the house, only house we're shot in. So immediately, once I figured out that house, I knew its history. And I knew that the house was saved. The house still exists. It's sitting in Heritage Park in Los Angeles now. So you can go.
I would go sit. This is what I'm talking about. I've never seen the movie, but I'm fascinated by the making of it. All right.
Yeah, so the house was moved, and before it was moved, before they could get the funds to move it, a lot of these houses were being burned down very mysteriously. So to keep it from being burned down, the Heritage Foundation, or the predecessors before them, hired these college kids to live there as human shields from the arsonists.
That's amazing.
I tracked down one of those guys.
Well, can I ask you one more thing? Was it true this film was found at a yard sale or something, or Is that?
That I don't know.
Okay.
No, that I don't know. I don't know where the print that we used for this. I don't know where it came from.
It might be the Young Marrieds. I get them mixed up sometimes.
Well, the Young Marrieds, that was Otis. I forget his name. We're friends on Facebook, and forgive me. I forget your name.
Otis Dimitrios or something, right?
Yeah, him. Yes, Dimitrios Otis. Yeah, that's it. Thank you. That saved me. He found that in one. He's in Canada, and he found it in the storage room of one of the last adult theater they had in his town.
Okay, I read that. Yeah, that's true. Well, it's great you find a lot of stuff in Canada. You found Revenge of the Dead, which I have a copy of, despite the efforts of He Who Must Not Be Named to stop it. That was cool to have that copy. I'm trying to think. I wanted to ask you really quick. You said you did a little bit of research for the Degenerates documentary on Andy Milligan. What was that like?
Yeah. Well, I kind of didn't know I was doing it. It's one of these things where one of the folks I've mentioned before that runs and owns a fairly significant boutique label will send me stuff to look into because he knows I love it. And I think he might have even said some of this stuff may go into something that they're doing for this thing. So I may have known about it, but it wasn't substantial. So I've done more substantial things for other things and gotten credit for them. But that was really nice because I got to go to Tribeca Film Festival where it was premiered, and I got to see it on the big screen for the first time at Tribeca, and I didn't know my name was going to be in the credits there. So it was certainly a thrill to one, get credit for and be officially a part of the Andy Milligan lore, if you will, get credit for that, and then to see it in a movie theater on the screen, and it's at Tribeca. So that was great.
You contribute a ton of wonderful stuff at the page, on the Facebook page for Andy Milligan. I enjoy it when I see it.
So he's one of those guys, like you said. They just, it's like the old the Friedman thing with the bag of flour, right?
Yeah.
You shake it and it keeps giving you more.
Yeah.
Milligan's definitely one of those things.
I think they're going to find all of his 60 films now. I'm pretty optimistic of that. Okay,
I hope so.
Takes time.
Yeah.
And I'd like to see Severin make the California years. Even the dreadful Surgikill should be included. I'd like to see another set, a Blu-ray set. Who knows what's going to happen?
I also at Tribeca, I'll sort of end with this with you, Doug. Here at Tribeca, we also got to see those two films screened, and sitting right behind me was Hope Stainsbury.
Wow.
And so I got to hear her commentary in my ear, because she was like, "Oh my goodness, I don't believe I did," and she's saying all these cute little things here, and I'm thinking, what world am I in? This is and all those people were in the theater with us watching this. The people that are still with us here, right? And also Rudy Gray was there. And
when is he ever going to come out with this updated version, Rudy Gray?
I'd heard from someone who will remain nameless that he had gotten an email from Rudy saying he was done. And I said something about that, and I got shot down by someone else who knows Rudy very well. So I'm like, you know what? I don't know.
Right. Well, I want to thank you for your time. It was really wonderful. Hopefully, more stuff comes up. We'll talk again in the near future, right? Because this is what we want to do with Planet and Crunch. Talk about the cult. It's not just Universal Monsters, although I love them. It's everything out there, including Titus Moody, who is one interesting person. When that book comes out, I'll be the first to buy it. I guarantee you that. All right, I'm eager for it. Maybe you can even get together a film on him someday. Who knows? That'd be a lot of fun too.
There's a ton of material. We'll see what we can get though. Yeah. It's a chore to get through.
No, I'm sure what you're doing is a Herculean task. So I have to give this little spiel right now. We're Plan 9 Crunch. You can subscribe to us at YouTube. It's been around 2 years. And we also have a TikTok page, but normally I have my daughter, who's far more attractive than me, do stuff on it. There's a Plan 9 Crunch TikTok page, Plan 9 Crunch podcast and blog you can like. And also we have a plan9crunch.com blog, which I've done with an art professor at Weber State named Steve Stones. And my son started doing kaiju also. We have lots of stuff there. But thank you very much. We really appreciate this, Shawn. And I'll say right now, that's a wrap.